said that he said that unchecked immigration would create, in his words, mixed populations.
Oh, wasn't there a guy at the beginning of the show talking about his art?
Yeah.
Sounds very similar, yeah.
Essentially, it's racism, is it not?
It is. Chronic xenophobia.
So do you think you could imagine this kind of policy being rolled out in any other country?
But I could imagine the Handmaid's Tale happening in sort of conservative
fertility
parts.
rates are falling,
they are
right?
plummeting, yeah.
So away from the sort of extreme racism of it, do you think there's looking at, for example, Japan, right? Numbers are declining. There are issues about what needs to be done. Do you think that's an issue that some nations do have to think about?
Probably.
Well, I think it becomes a very insular country-by-country problem, because is the world suffering from a lack of people? Absolutely not. Are some countries or some regions' populations declining? I mean, there are areas within New Zealand where it is. So are we going to pay the people of Wanganui to have more children, or, other areas where the population is declining?
I think immigration seems to be, there's enough people in the world right now, and the planet can barely sustain those numbers, right? So let's try and redistribute. Actually, on that note of Japan, if you haven't seen yet, on Netflix is a fabulous series by Christiana Manapur on sex around the world. And if you've seen it, it is brilliant. She goes to different places around the world and talks about the culture around that, and the Japan one is just fascinating.
Well, meanwhile, the coffee cup thing was burning up the text. Wolf at the door, Dunedin have a range of real cups available to take away at no cost. You are just asked to return great coffee, and people... And I don't understand that. And no, I don't work there.
She does.
Another one here. What about the cafe which refuses to fill your own keep cup to take away? Really? They want you to use takeaway cups. And they mention a cafe in Timaru, which is a culprit. I won't name the name there. Wallace, look up Wellington Coffee Cup Company again. Reusable coffee cups you return at any participating cafe, says Nikki. Chris says sanctimony is all right, considering the environmental effects of producing and transporting what is essentially an unnecessary luxury item. And it says the cafe is absolutely right, Wallace. Check out other cafes. I encourage that woman to go elsewhere. So big response there. To finish, our thermostats are sexist, a piece on the News Hub suggests. They've enlisted the help of a University of Auckland lecturer to figure out why women are often colder in offices than men. Apparently it's all to do with our metabolism and how we regulate our body temperature. Everyone has a zone of temperature which they are most comfortable with, and that's what's taken into account when workspaces are designed, along with the average age and weight of the workers. So where does sexism come into this? Well, it seems that most air conditioning systems are based on a model developed in the 60s, and it was based on studies of men, especially a 40-year-old man about 70 kgs. Nowadays, though, at least half the office is likely to be women. How do we fix this, Nadine? Have you experienced this in the workplace, being really cold?
Well, I can't say that Radio New Zealand's thermostat is sexist at the moment because I'm absolutely roasting.
It is more, yeah.
It's really warm.
It's never worked.
It's like Bikram radio.
Yeah,
We've
Bikram
complained
radio.
every second day.
And the office I work in, bizarrely, is like this 6-star green building, supposedly, but it is roasting in the summer and it is freezing in the winter because we don't have air conditioning. It's got, louvers and stuff, so I don't know what to take from there other than...
Love me a cold office.
Love your cold office?
Gotta be cold,
really?
gotta be crisp, yeah. My team are there in puffer jackets. No, they're not really, I'm joking.
So thermostats are sexist.
Maybe.
Unbelievable.
And the boss just calls the shots.
Yeah. Meanwhile, get our thermostat fixed at RNZ. There you go, nationwide call out. Nadine Higgins and Mark Moff Thomas. Great to have you on the panel. I'm Wallace Chapman, back bright and early, 3:45 tomorrow.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, evacuated Wakefield residents get the green light to return to their homes immediately. We're live. But they're warned not to use any farm machinery and be ready to leave at a moment's notice. There's been a boost to firefighter numbers with 190 on the ground, 10 helicopters and 2 planes overhead. Checkpoint is there as self-styled jailhouse lawyer Arthur Taylor walks free from Waikeria prison. He spent a total of almost 40 years behind bars but reckons his life of crime is over. And serial rapist Malcolm Rewa is on trial for the 3rd time for the murder of Susan Burdett. You can check us out on Facebook or Sky TV Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5. No mai haere mai. Good afternoon, I'm Paul Brennan. Civil Defence is warning returning Wakefield residents they must still be prepared to evacuate if need be. About 2,500 people are now returning to their homes after being evacuated last week because of the threat of fire. The Nelson Tasman Civil Defence Group Controller Roger Ball announced the decision an hour ago.
This immediate return, ladies and gentlemen, is for residents only. Therefore, we ask that those residents please ensure they're able to demonstrate they are a returning resident if asked by police. I must emphasise that returning residents must be prepared to evacuate if conditions change. There does remain an element of risk, and that is something for all of us to keep an eye on.
Roger Ball says State Highway 6 in Wakefield has reopened for through traffic and escorted convoys through the town halted. However, people who don't live in Wakefield will not be able to stop in the town until 7 tomorrow morning. Speed limits have also been reduced by 20 kilometres across Wakefield because of likely congestion. Wakefield School will continue at the Hope Community Centre in Hope tomorrow. Roger Ball says he's still actively planning for the residents of the 4 fire-affected valleys to be able to return home. The police and the Defence Force will maintain a highly visible presence in Wakefield throughout the night. The police will also have a 24-hour presence at the Wakefield Police Station. The acting Tasman District Commander Zane Hooper says the fire situation and the risk of re-evacuation remains.
We are balancing the challenge of keeping you, the community, safe while allowing you to return to your properties as soon as possible. We are asking, please, that you do not become complacent simply because you cannot see flame, and that you remain in a state of being prepared to evacuate. This state of prepare to evacuate means that at any time until further notice, you may need to re-evacuate at any time under urgency.
Zane Hooper says vulnerable residents who were evacuated earlier by St John Ambulance will not be able to return yet. He says returned residents need to keep aware of alerts such as text messages from Civil Defence and keep an ear out for sirens in case they have to evacuate again. The government is providing a further $50,000 for residents disrupted by the Tasman fire. Last week it confirmed an initial $20,000 to the Mayoral Relief Fund and today bumped that up to $70,000. The Civil Defence Minister Chris Farfoy says the extra money is to plug any gaps and other funding available to affected residents or businesses in the region. He says the government has also set up an 0800 helpline for residents to call if they need any help from government agencies. The number is 0800 779 997, 0800 779 997. A court has heard serial rapist Malcolm Wray murdered Susan Burdett with a baseball bat she kept for her own protection. Wray is on trial for the third time for the Auckland woman's murder in the High Court at Auckland. Ms Burdett was bludgeoned to death in her South Auckland home in 1992. This morning, Crown Prosecutor Gareth Case told the jury Wray was responsible for a series of sexual attacks on other women between 1987 and 1996. He said Wray's offending revealed a pattern of behaviour reflected in Ms Burdett's case.
These features are all hallmarks of Mr Rewa's sexual and violent offending. They bear a number of significant similarities to the offences he committed between 1987 and 1996. And the reason why Ms Burdett's rape and murder bears those similarities is obvious.
Crown Prosecutor Gareth Case. The Prime Minister says under no circumstances is it acceptable for government departments to include questions about New Zealanders' political persuasions in surveys. Inland Revenue has admitted it was wrong to include the question in the research about the public's view on fairness in the tax system. The State Services Minister, Chris Hipkins, has asked the State Services Commissioner to investigate. Jacinda Ardern says she was only told about the IRD survey this morning, and if there are other examples of it happening, it needs to end.
It's, I think, absolutely right that state services issue guidance to departments. There will be legitimate cases where they will be undertaking research, but there should never be political questions attached to that research in terms of the way that people vote. That's just not appropriate.
Jacinda Ardern says any explanation from IRD is immaterial as it wasn't appropriate. Career criminal Arthur Taylor has been shopping at the warehouse and getting to grips with a new cell phone as he faces life outside the wire. He was released on parole this morning after nearly 40 years in prison. The 60-year-old has spent 39 of the past 46 years in prison and has mounted several successful private prosecutions from behind bars. In an exclusive interview with Checkpoint's Lisa Owen, Taylor was surprised to discover prices at the warehouse hadn't increased much since he last visited in 2004. And he's reassuring those who fear he will reoffend while on parole.
The number of people the public have got to be worried about, I'd probably be about number 10,020 or something. You know, there's a hell of a lot of people in the queue in front of me. Yeah. No, they don't need to be worried about me at all. Not at all.
Arthur Taylor, and you can hear more of his interview on Checkpoint with Lisa Owen after this news bulletin. It's 5 minutes past 5. On to sport, it's all a bit foggy for teenage snowboarder Zoe Sadowski-Synnott. Sadowski-Synnott has won the women's slopestyle at the World Championships in Utah, despite being concussed during qualifying. The 17-year-old hit her head during her second qualifying run yesterday, so was not going to compete in today's final. However, today's final was cancelled due to high winds, and the Wanaka-based snowboarder won the title, having posted the best score in qualifying. The Olympic bronze medalist had resigned herself to a no result.
I was actually saving it for my second run, and then finals, you usually build up, but I was real stoked with the run I put down my first run, and then I was hoping to build on it on my second run, but I fell on one of the rails before it.
Zoe Sadowski-Synnott. The Black Caps batting coach Craig McMillan has resigned to take up a role in the Indian Premier League. McMillan will finish up with the New Zealand cricket side after this year's World Cup in England in July. He will join former national coach Mike Hesson on the coaching staff at the Kings 11 Punjab side. McMillan has been the Black Caps batting coach, for the past 5 years, and hopes a strong tactical understanding of the game has rubbed off on the players.
I've got a good understanding of the tactical side of the game, so, different situations, different tempos that you need to bat at different times, and certainly I continue to challenge our guys, our players, on a lot of those things, because I think the tactical side is very important at the international level. The technical side is perhaps a little bit more important further down at some of those lower levels.
It's Craig McMillan, and that's the news.
The smoke clears in Nelson.
I saw a small smile yesterday, and I can tell you that was like the biggest ray of sunshine we've seen in many days.
Simon Bridges warns of low investor confidence.
Capital gains tax, fair pay, things that I think could have a somewhat recessionary effect over the next 18 months.
And thousands celebrate the big guy out in Auckland.
What it's really about is a celebration of life. New Zealand's a good country to live in, I say.
Live here and listen to us. Morning Report with Guy Aspinall and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, is Auckland ready for 2 million people? Public policy advocate Owen Gill says no, but he has some bold ideas. And after 10, as algorithms revolutionise the world around us, how does logic contribute to advancing technology? Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. Here's the short forecast now, taking us through to midnight tomorrow, Tuesday, from Met Service, Northland to Waikato. That includes Coromandel. It will be fine, but brief showers are possible around midday tomorrow. Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine apart from isolated showers in the afternoon and evenings. Waitomo to Manawatu, including Taumarunui and Taihape, fine today, cloudy periods tomorrow, isolated showers until evening tomorrow. Hortowhenua through to Wellington, also Wairarapa, Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine, brief light showers tomorrow morning possible. Bulla and Northern Westland, rain developing this evening, easing to fine spells, isolated showers tomorrow. Southern Westland and Fiordland, rain, brief heavy falls, easing to showers in the morning, fine spells increasing. Canterbury, mainly fine for the rest of today, brief light rain possible overnight, then cloudy periods tomorrow. Otago and Southland, cloud increasing, a few spots of rain from this evening, fine spells tomorrow with isolated showers, low cloud is possible about the coast, and for the Chathams, low cloud and drizzle. It's exactly 9 minutes past 5.
And you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Coming up shortly on Checkpoint, he's spent almost 40 of the past 46 years behind bars. But this morning, just before 6 a.m, I was there as self-styled jailhouse lawyer Arthur Taylor was released from prison. We had exclusive access as he was reunited with his family. We'll bring you his story, and Arthur Taylor will join us here in the studio. But first, let's go to Nelson, where in the past hour, Wakefield residents have begun returning to their homes. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Dan Cook are at the State Highway 6 cordon and join us now via live view. Nita.
Hi Lisa, yes, we've even managed to sneak a little bit into Wakefield where there's a steady stream of traffic coming through, cars full of beds or children or belongings, anything everyone took when they left here 2 days ago, unsure about when they would come back. I've managed to speak to a few residents briefly, but they're all very keen to get home. It's a state somewhat of normality now. People are buzzing around. There's a lot of Red Cross about, fire crews and a lot of police. At this afternoon's briefing, when they did announced that Wakefield residents would be coming back, police made it very clear it was only for Wakefield residents, and anyone who was seen to be in Wakefield without a good reason to be here or a place to be would be asked to leave. They have said, you know, you're happy to go home, but this is not a time for complacency. The conditions here haven't changed in terms of their dryness. Fire crews have just done very incredibly well on working on the blaze, which is still not too far from here. So they've emphasised really that you need to be on alert. If sirens go off, you have to be ready to evacuate at any stage. Not everyone has been able to come back. Some of the more residents who may have had issues getting in and out, they might have needed help from St John. They haven't been able to come back yet just because the stakes are so high and people are on red alert. There were also a few messages from the fire and police teams about people just really needing to heed those warnings about taking care in the dry conditions. The fire and police crews said that some places agricultural equipment is still being used despite those messages to please stop mowing your lawns or anything that could create a spark. Perhaps somewhat unbelievably, in one of the paddocks right next door to where the helicopters are taking off, some agricultural equipment was seen being used. But it is somewhat a sense of relief today for people coming home. They're able to check on stock and all their belongings that they did leave. Earlier today I was with Anne Mokta, who is one of the residents here in Wakefield. She left and she left quite a bit of stock here, 70 sheep and a smaller number, 11 cows, and was quite worried about them. So I was with her when she was able to return earlier today, unsure about what the situation was, and she's not sure whether all of those stock will survive the last stress of the past few days.
Hungry stock and hungry plants. And the house is okay, but it's just like it feels ghostly. Yeah, because it's all quiet and everything has to be left, you know.
What is the condition of the stock?
They're hungry, and our sheep will have to be transported out because they desperately need some more. But the cattle seem to be okay. If we keep feeding them, they'll maintain. Yeah, there's water for them. Yeah.
With the sheep, are they at a condition where it's survivable?
Probably not. They need to be drenched by the looks of things, and they'll be housed at the AMP showgrounds until things settle down and we get some more feed for them. Yeah.
How many sheep have you gotten, and how hard is that?
I think there are about 73 out there. Yeah. And so it'll be a relief to see them go because it's been a worry. And,
weighing on your mind a bit?
Oh yes, yeah, because we just don't like our stock being like that. Yeah.
Are they being well taken care of by the staff who've come here today?
Oh yes, definitely. Yes, very, because I've got a keen eye to look at and see how they are. Yes, they're the only people that have listened.
And that was Wakefield resident Anne Mokta speaking to Nita Blake Person. We'll go back to Nita later in the programme, and also to our reporter Logan Church, who is at the first of 2 community meetings being held tonight at Appleby School. 190 firefighters have continued to battle the fire, which is burning across 2,300 hectares with a perimeter of 25 kilometres. Wind gusts of around 40 kilometres an hour are expected to last into the night, with no rain forecast for the next 14 days. Fire and Emergency Controller Trevor Mitchell spoke with Alex Perrottet just a few minutes ago about the decision to allow some residents to return home.
It's really time. It's a big thing for us. And the more time we've got, the more control we can attain. And the guys and girls on the hill are doing a fantastic job in strengthening the containment lines, and that will go on for some days. But there's still some hot areas within 2,300 hectares, as you can imagine.
And you spent a fair bit of the weekend burning back, and I suppose the conditions were better with slower winds than were expected. Have you been doing any more of that today?
No, we haven't done any more of that, but there's still large areas of unburnt material and forest within that 25 kilometre perimeter.
Are you worried about that?
We can't guarantee anything. We're working on that as we speak, but our pressure points have got good containment lines, and we'll just continue to maintain those.
It is 5:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or flick us an email at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It was a beautiful morning to get out of prison, according to Arthur Taylor, who was one of our most high-profile inmates until he walked free from Waikeria prison about 11 hours ago. The 62-year-old's been in jail for 40-odd years, on and off. His conviction list, meth, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, is a serious role of dishonour that he says he now regrets. All of it. The self-styled jailhouse lawyer mounted several successful private prosecutions from behind bars, campaigning for the right for prisoners to vote, amongst other things. And Checkpoint's cameraman Nick Monroe and I had exclusive access to Taylor as he enjoyed his first hours of freedom. He claims age has made him wiser, and upholding the law, not breaking it, is his buzz now. And he's trading in his prison sweats to become a Dunedin scarfie.
Free man.
It's hard to describe what freedom looks like, but in this case it's a stocky bloke just 3 years off collecting a pension, barrelling out of a nondescript van in a prison car park.
Hey, hey!
Morning, eh?
Hey, hey!
Beautiful morning to be able to get out of prison, isn't it? Hey? Hi. Thanks for everyone coming.
Arthur Taylor's latest lag, as they say, has been 14 years of a 17-year sentence for a raft of crimes, including meth and firearms charges. No wonder he's so chuffed to be on the move.
Marvellous! Marvellous! Yeah. But I know your good friend Mike to be here, Jenny, and my darling sister, of course, and Steve. Yeah. Bloody wonderful. Yeah.
So this is what freedom looks like.
This is what it looks like at the moment. It looks like we've got a beautiful day coming, doesn't it? Hey.
It's early when Taylor's sister and biggest supporter Joanne arrives to collect him. Mates Jenny and Mike are there too. Joanne's been waiting a while, and not just today.
I'm just anxious. I just want him out. I just want him home. Been waiting a very long time for this.
How long exactly?
We're in our 15th year. So, yeah, very long time.
14 years behind bars comes with some baggage, including a box stuffed with legal documents, a clear rubbish sack of toiletries, leftover snacks and bits and bobs.
So what did you do last night? Did you go around and say goodbyes? Or?
Yeah. All my mates were there to say goodbye, and there's a few of them quite, obviously pretty sorry to see me go, actually, because they're worried as hell they're going to roll back a lot of the good conditions I've got them since I've been here.
There's also the standard release cheque of $350. Just up the road is a gem of a bakery Taylor wants to pull in for an actual taste of freedom. A sign inside warns customers they're under camera surveillance, perhaps a subliminal reminder he's on parole with his work and living arrangements monitored. He orders a cappuccino and a ham roll. For a man who's escaped prison by his count more than a dozen times, liberating that roll from the glad wrap proves a challenge.
I don't know.
Wait for it, baby. How good is that? Good
Beautiful. All right? I can see there's some little pleasures in life that you must out on, eh?
Your clothes?
Yep.
Where did they come from today?
Today, I got them from the warehouse on Friday. Yep. Went out and bought them on from the warehouse on Friday. I went out to
Did they take you out?
They took me out because I had no clothes that would fit, and they didn't want me getting out the door. It might look too good for them if I got out the door with nothing. So they took me down there and put a GPS tracker on me, believe it or not, a GPS tracker, 3 officers, and we went into Te Aomiri.
And you chose your clothes?
Well, first of all, I wasn't sure of the prices, you see, so I said, let's go to the op shop. So we went to 3 of them, but nothing was of any use in there, so then we went to the warehouse. And I was quite amazed, actually, that the prices for stuff in there seemed to be much the same as they were 14 years ago.
Mike and his wife Jenny did a bunch of legwork with Taylor on the perjury case stemming from David Tamaheri's murder trial. They give him a brand new pair of boots, still boxed up. He couldn't have them in prison.
And here, Arthur.
It's the famous boots. Now these highlighters, believe it or not, were banned from prison because they're yellow. And all the gang colours are banned, you see, and the yellow happens to be killer bees. So they got sent back to Mike after I got them okayed, by the way. They got sent in and then sent back, and you received them back, didn't you? And what was the matter with these? Oh, I think they were about 1 centimetre too high.
Freedom is choosing your shoes too. Taylor's been paroled to Dunedin, to the home of a law student and her husband. They've bonded over legal cases and will meet for the first time today.
I've heard a lot of good stories about Dunedin. It's got a real good university social club scene, because I'll be up at the university a bit, you see. Hopefully enrolled in one of the papers I want to do up there. Yeah, 1 day a week anyway. Yeah.
So,
no, I'm looking forward to it, you know.
Have you been there before?
Just when I passed through there in 1975 when I escaped from Invercargill Borstal when I was in a hurry. Didn't stop to see much of the sights.
But before that, Taylor's first roadie in 14 years will take him via his sister's place near Paeroa to Auckland to tidy up some legal business before heading south.
You all right? Hey? Here's your little sister.
At the farm, there's a welcoming committee, a niece, nephews, grandniece and nephew, some born while he was behind bars. He's Uncle B, or boy to them. Their priorities, bringing him up to speed with their tree climbing skills. Introducing Poppy, the Chihuahua.
Loves it. He loves that, hey?
And Fergus the goat. All scenes from ordinary life, but for the one extraordinary character in them. Arthur Taylor's criminal career started early. In 1972, there were forgery charges. As the years clocked up, so did the convictions. Current total, more than 150, many of them serious. Firearms charges, cannabis, meth, robberies, kidnap, and the escapes.
Well, I really regret all of it now, but you know, I regret that my life hadn't been so much different, you know, that I hadn't ended up in the Pooney boys' home and got introduced to crime.
Last time he was legitimately out, Helen Clark was Prime Minister, Don Brash leader of the National Party. There were no iPhones, Uber or Instagram. But after 40 years on and off behind bars, even the old stuff is a little unfamiliar, including a car his sister has waiting for him.
How do you unlock it? How do you unlock it, Joe?
Where's the keys, Joe?
Up by the chrome handle, Arthur, to the left, the black button to the left. Flick that back.
Oh, yeah. Of course. There you go. Put your seatbelt on. See us.
It's off-road only until he renews his licence. And we know you're smart because we've seen you in court. Why do you think you did those dumb things?
Well, people are funny old creatures, Lisa. I mean, some of our most brilliant people make mistakes, you know. You know, they make mistakes and do dumb things, you know, and I don't think I'm alone in that. I mean, you know, some of our top, like ask Jamie Lee Ross, you know. Why? I mean, we've seen quite a performance. It really amused us inside watching Jamie. We thought, are these the bastards that are running our country? You know? Yeah, so
you're not seriously saying that is on parallel with your criminal record?
No, but I'm using it as an example of how people make mistakes.
There's been 19 failed attempts at parole. The 20th, while approved, was not quite the charm. There were conflicting psych assessments on his re-offending risk, but the parole board says Taylor doesn't pose an undue risk to the safety of the community. Are you going to stay out of trouble?
Absolutely. Yep.
How can you be so confident?
Because I know where I am in life. I've the sort of characteristics and abilities that I used in crime, you know, they're now devoted to pro-social and legal activities. So I get the same rewards from that as I used to from crime.
Behind bars, Taylor schooled himself in law, and the record shows he's pretty good at it. For a guy who's dead set on making everybody else follow the rules, for a large part of your life, you have not followed the rules.
That's correct.
So
that's correct.
Can you see that there's a double standard there?
Well, we're talking about two different time periods now, Lisa. I mean, I wasn't involved in enforcing the law back then, was I? I was involved in breaking it. So now you want to be aware I actually enforce the law now.
He's challenged the smoke-free jails rule and the ban on prisoners voting. He's claimed some victories in both cases. According to Taylor, he's a social crusader now.
I firmly, 100% know I've done a hell of a lot more good than I've ever done bad, Lisa. I can tell you that right now and here without...
You know there's a lot of people who are going to disagree with that.
Well, there's people who disagree with everything, isn't there? You know? That's what's so good about being living in a democracy.
You've done enough to wipe meth charges, you've done enough to wipe ag robbery charges, a kidnap charge, escaping. You've done enough good to wipe those,
Absolutely.
do you think?
Yep, I have. Yep. Yes, I have.
Hand on heart.
Hand on heart, I have paid my price, more than paid my price. The law says it, I say it, and morally as well. And people that know me will tell you that as well.
And some people watching this will think, God, that guy's got an ego.
They can say what they like, Liz. That's what's so great about our country. People can say what they think.
Taylor could chat endlessly about the legal business, but ask him about his finances, and he's clear that's no business of ours. What was your income for tax purposes last year?
Last year, no comment. No comment. I'll simply say...
Was it more than the average wage, Arthur?
No comment. I'll simply say I paid all taxes that were due, and the tax department are quite happy with me.
Let me put it another way. Do you have the means to support yourself?
Well, I think I said to you once before, I won't be sleeping under a motorway bridge, and that remains the situation.
En route, he's adapting to the free world.
Hello? Let's swipe up that. Hello?
It's straight to the High Court in Auckland to tidy up some legal matters. It's a case he's fighting, not defending. So, from today, he's using the front door. And Arthur Taylor and his supporter Hazel Hill join me now in the Auckland studio. Hazel, if I can talk to you first. You are taking Arthur into your home. You've met him for the first time today.
Yes.
People hearing that will think, you're crazy.
I know, people have said that a few times. Look, I've talked to Arthur a lot on the phone, and I have a great respect for his legal skills, and yeah, I know that he's into upholding the law, not breaking it now, and that's where we meet in terms of interest. So yeah, I'm fine with it.
So you know what you're getting yourself in for?
Yes.
Arthur, who's going to hire you? You want to do good, you say. You want to work for your money. Who's going to hire you?
Well, somebody wants to look, just past the cover, Lisa, and wants results and not promises. Proven results. Yeah.
So, I would argue that boredom could be your worst enemy.
Oh, could be anybody's worst enemy, yeah. I'm not going to be bored, though. I can assure you of that. I've got plenty of...
What are your immediate plans?
My immediate plans are just to relax a bit, get out of the jail, sort of, it's almost like I feel that I'm still, I'm going to wake up in jail. It's sort of surreal a bit at the moment. But yeah, just get away from all that and just relax a bit, yeah.
You made the comment to me today, you had a cheque. It was for $350 when you came out of jail. What's your issue with that in terms of other prisoners?
My issue with that is, look, we're trying to reduce reoffending. Everyone who we rehabilitate, right, who makes a successful transition between prison and the community, hey, could be 50, 60 victims saved, right? $350. The same as was dished out in 1991. That's what they're getting now. I mean, as I think I've noted before, imagine if I got...
How long is it supposed to last?
2 weeks.
Right.
2 weeks. Yeah. Imagine if we locked some of our parliamentarians' perks in at the 1991 levels, eh? What do they say about that?
Has he got a point, Hazel?
I think he has got a point, yes.
Yeah.
OK, so justice reform, it is a big issue for this government. Do you see yourself making a contribution to that, and how so? I do, because I'm not speaking hypothetically or, from second-hand sources. I've been at the coalface. I've been, where the rubber meets the road, right at the sharp point of the criminal justice system. And I think I've got a hell of a lot of first-hand knowledge and experience, and I'm a straight shooter. Have any politicians approached you yet?
Yes, they have.
Name some names.
David Seymour, people like that, yeah.
And what about those working on the justice reforms for the government?
Chester Burrows, yep. Chester's very interested in what we can, what contribution I might be able to make. Yeah, funny enough, Chester was a cop that used to chase me around years ago.
So he's already given you a call?
He's sent us some emails.
OK.
Yeah.
So is it likely that someone sitting in a lecture theatre at Dunedin University is going to glance across and see Arthur Taylor? Or any other university in this country?
Highly likely, yep.
Law degree or no?
Don't really need a law degree, but I do. There's some areas of law I want to bone up on, such as Maori land law and some of that sort of stuff.
Is he employable, Hazel?
Oh, well, yes, I think so, because his results are so high, so good.
Thank you both for joining me in the studio. Hazel Hill, who was taking Arthur Taylor into her home, and Arthur Taylor, who is now a free man.
Yeah, I'm going to remain one.
Good. up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, serial rapist Malcolm Wray goes on trial for the third time for the murder of Susan Burdett. Snowboarder Zoe Sadowski-Synnott wins a world championship title while recovering at home from a concussion. And if you've just joined us, Wakefield residents have this afternoon been given the green light to return home. We'll go live to Appleby School in Richmond, where a community meeting has just begun. Don't forget, we'd love to hear from you. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook, Checkpoint, or email us, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But first, here's Paul Brennan with the headlines.
Thank you, Lisa. And residents from the fire-threatened town of Wakefield have been allowed back to their homes, but they've been told they need to be ready, to be evacuated again at short notice. About 2,500 people are returning to the town south of Nelson after being evacuated last week because of the threat of fire. The Nelson Tasman Civil Defence Controller Roger Ball says he's still planning for residents of the 4 rural valleys affected by the fire to be able to return home. And the government is providing a further $50,000 for residents affected by the Tasman fire. Last week it confirmed an initial $20,000 to the Mayoral Relief Fund and today bumped that up to $70,000. The Civil Defence Minister, Chris Farfoy, says the extra money is to plug any gaps in other funding available to affected residents or businesses in the region. An Auckland court has been told how serial rapist Malcolm Wray's pattern of offending behaviour shows he was responsible for the murder of Papatoetoe woman Susan Burdett in 1992. Wray is on trial for the third time for the killing in which Ms Burdett was bludgeoned to death with a baseball bat she kept for security. The Crown Prosecutor has pointed out how Wray was responsible for a series of sexual attacks on other women between 1987 and 1996. The Prime Minister says under no circumstances is it acceptable for government departments to include questions about New Zealanders' political persuasions in surveys. Inland Revenue has admitted it was wrong to include the question in the research about the public's view on tax system fairness. Jacinda Ardern says any explanation from IRD is immaterial as it was not appropriate. The police say a 5-month-old baby was found dead at the scene of a suspected homicide in Motueka last night. A 41-year-old woman was also seriously injured at the Memorial Drive address. The police have been examining the scene today and say they're speaking with someone in relation to the death. Those are the headlines.
Thanks, Paul. It is 29 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Time for business now with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona. Contact Energy, triple its first half-year profit. What's driving all of that?
Well, it was helped a lot by some issues with inflows into the hydro lakes, so there wasn't as much power, so that raised the wholesale prices. There was also an outage with gas-fired alternatives. Contact wasn't vulnerable there because they're the biggest and largest power company, so did reasonably well out of that. And so they posted a net profit of $276 million for the first half. Now that compares with $58 million a year ago. That was also bumped up, though, by the sale of its LPG and gas storage business as well. So that was, I think they had a net gain there of $172 million. The market was really happy with that. That particular company gained, 1.5%, which is pretty good in a market that overall in the Asia region is not very happy at the moment. So it went up 10 cents to $6.32. Pretty good. And interesting times ahead for the energy sector for sure. Well, something to watch.
Well, and it's reporting season, so Briscoes, they're heading towards some big numbers?
Yes. No, that's not so much of a surprise, I guess, because the managing director of Briscoe Group, Rod Duke, seems to be somewhat of a wizard when it comes to the retail sector, always doing better somehow than the time before. And certainly isn't disappointing this time, forecasting a full-year net profit of $63 million. And that's better than last year. And you consider that that's in a retail market which has been in the doldrums somewhat. He says his business is booming along, and that's because of promotions, marketing, smart buying, and their online shopping has up 27%. So they're doing very well, and they're, not resting on their laurels, though they expect the year ahead to be difficult. They're not going to be backing off their effort. And sure, the market liked that too. Briscoe Group's share price rose nearly 3% by 9 cents to $3.33. And that's pretty good, like I say, against a backdrop of pretty much a market that's pretty upset over the weekend following Donald Trump's decisions to, first of all, the talks between the Republicans and Democrats breaking down over the funding of the wall, so government shutdown looming there. And I guess the trade talks too, no plans to resume high-level discussions before March 1st, so very concerning about what's going on with the Chinese economy. And of course, Europe also had a rough weekend as well with a downgrade there. So overall, the ASX, for example, was down about 1/3%. Our market rose 1/3%. So we rose to 33 points to 9,210. Pretty good considering all. Our dollar is trading at 67.6 US cents. It's holding its own ahead of the Reserve Bank, a monetary policy statement on Wednesday afternoon. 95.2 Australian and 52.3 pence.
Thanks for that, Nona. Let's turn now to serial rapist Malcolm Rewa. He has gone on trial for the third time for the murder of Susan Burdett, more than a quarter of a century after she was bludgeoned to death in her South Auckland home. Rewa has already been convicted of raping the 39-year-old, but 2 juries have been unable to decide if he murdered her. Today, more than 2 decades after he last faced a jury, the 65-year-old man, with the help of a stick, walked into the dock at the High Court in Auckland. Our reporter, Annika Smith, was there, and just a warning that some viewers may find details of her report disturbing.
Crown Prosecutor Gareth Case began his opening address by taking the jurors back to the scene of the crime.
Susan Burdett was found dead in her home on Wednesday, the 25th of March 1992. She was lying naked on her bed. The upper half of her body was covered in bedclothes, a duvet. The lower part of her body was uncovered and naked, and her legs were hanging over the side of the bed.
Susan Burdett had been last seen 2 days prior, leaving a local bowling alley in good spirits. Colleagues grew concerned the following day when she didn't show up for work. Her friend, Stephen Dawson, later found her body in her Papatoetoe home.
Mr. Dawson called for help and police arrived shortly after. As part of the police examination, the bedding covering Ms. Burdett's head was peeled away. Brain matter and a significant amount of blood was found on the sheets underneath. A bra was found over her eyes.
A year after Ms. Burdett was killed, 17-year-old Taina Porter told police he did it. He spent more than 2 decades in prison, but his name was later cleared when the Privy Council quashed his convictions. Mr. Case told the jurors Rewa had already been convicted of raping Ms. Burdett, and it was the Crown's case that he murdered her too.
During the course of the rape, there was a struggle. The accused covered the upper half of her body with a duvet, and when she was in that position, he hit her at least 5 times to the head with a blunt object. Ms. Burdett kept a baseball bat by her bed, and when she was first seen by her friend Stephen Dawson, that baseball bat was lying on the bed next to her.
Mr. Case said the jury would hear Rewa had carried out a series of sexual attacks on other women between 1987 and 1996.
And the Crown says that they involved a number of recurring features. The exposure of the lower half, naked lower half, of the women's bodies, the covering of the upper half, in particular the head, with clothing or most commonly bedding, and the positioning of the legs of the victims off the edge of the bed.
He said these attacks were often surprise rapes in victims' homes and revealed a pattern in Rewa's offending reflected in Ms. Burdett's case.
These features are all hallmarks of Mr. Rewa's sexual and violent offending. They bear a number of significant similarities to the offences he committed between 1987 and 1996. And the reason why Ms. Burdett's rape and murder bears those similarities is obvious.
Rewa's defence lawyer said his client was innocent after his first 2 trials and was before the court again an innocent man. Paul Chambers said the jurors couldn't help but be influenced by widespread media coverage of the case and asked that they consider only the facts they heard in court. The trial before Justice Venning is set down for 4 weeks. Antuiti ko te mātua ko Annika Smith aho.
Snowboarder Zoe Sadowski-Synnott can hardly believe she's become the first New Zealander to claim a World Championship title. The 17-year-old has won gold in the women's slopestyle at the World Champs in Utah. Sadowski-Synnott sustained a concussion after hitting her head in qualifying yesterday, so was not going to compete in today's final. But the final was then cancelled due to high winds, and she won the title courtesy of posting the best score in qualifying. The Commonwealth Games bronze medalist and X-Game gold medalist talked to Bridget Tunnicliffe about how she heard the news this morning.
So I was pretty much just at home on the phone with my mum when the head coach came in for New Zealand and was like, "You're world champion," and I was like, "Oh, that's crazy news after the past 24 hours."
So did you get a minor concussion or something?
Yeah, I concussed myself in my second run yesterday, so I put my first run down, and that's the score that I won with. And then second run, I fell and hit my head pretty bad and got a concussion.
Wow, so a best possible outcome for you given the circumstances. When you do when you do a qualifying run, do you hold a little bit back, or do you go for it 100%?
Usually you hold back a bit. Well, I did at least, because I was actually saving it for my second run, and then finals, like, you usually, like, build up, but I was real stoked with the run I put down my first run, and then I was hoping to build on it on my second run, but I fell on one of the rails before it.
So how would you say this world title compares to, say, the X Games and the Olympics?
Well, it's kind of super hard to compare just because there's been so many great podiums that I've been lucky enough to be on. But I competed in World Champs 2 years ago in Spain, and I came second in slopestyle. And so this, compared to that, is just insane because I kind of one up to myself by winning. So that's pretty cool. But, like, it's so hard to compare.
And the fact that you're the first New Zealand snowboarder or skier to claim a world title, that's special in itself.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked. I can't even believe it. Just sitting here now talking to you. I sat on the top of the podium and they played the New Zealand anthem, which was amazing. And yeah.
So 2 golds at 2 back-to-back pinnacle events in slopestyle. My understanding is that consistency in results in snowboarding and skiing is pretty hard to achieve.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked with how I rode yesterday and that I was able to put a run down. It's always nerve-wracking coming out of a good result like at the X Games and then coming into the next event with people expecting you to do it again, but try not to let it affect me, and so yeah.
And that was New Zealand snowboarder Zoe Sadowski-Synnott. United States-backed forces are continuing an all-out offensive to drive hundreds of Islamic State fighters from their last stronghold in northeastern Syria. Once a sprawling caliphate across both Syria and Iraq, Islamic State now holds just a small town about 4 square kilometres. The Syrian Democratic Forces say up to 600 are estimated to be holed up in the enclave, including foreigners and other hardened fighters. CNN reporter Ben Wederman is embedded with the US-backed Kurdish fighters and sent this report.
The final battle began just after sunset, with coalition airstrikes pounding the last dot on the map held by the state that called itself Islamic. The town of Bahuz al-Falqani in eastern Syria. But there was no calm before the storm, as gunners with the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces rained heavy machine gun fire down onto ISIS targets, while civilians who had stuck it out in the town made their way to safer ground. A mortar round exploded near 14-year-old Mahmoud Nazal days ago, his wounds still fresh. His brother Thamer says they couldn't afford to pay the ISIS fighters $1,000 apiece to leave, and thus had to sneak out under cover of darkness. An hour before the final push began, Arab tribal fighters danced, a useful morale-raising exercise, perhaps, before the coming battle. The bombing of the town continued throughout the night, intensifying at first light. The battle to take the last enclave of ISIS in Syria is now into its second day. Syrian democratic forces have made good progress within the town, but they are encountering some resistance from the ISIS fighters. This despite the constant heavy coalition airstrikes on the town. But as the day wore on, the going got tougher and the airstrikes increased. ISIS has dug a network of tunnels and trenches. Its fighters, some of its most experienced and battle-hardened. This battle will not end the war on ISIS. When ISIS, the state, is replaced by ISIS, the terrorist insurgency, Jamaat, an Arab fighter tells me, it will be tougher still. This war is easy, he says. We're fighting them on a front. It will be different when it becomes guerrilla warfare. Victory of sorts is at hand. Peace in this tortured land is still elusive.
It's 5:45. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keep your feedback coming. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The Mexican film Roma has taken out the top awards at this year's BAFTAs in London and made history at the same time. It won Best Film and Best Director for Alfonso Cuarón, the first time a film made for Netflix has picked up a major industry award. But while Roma took the two big prizes, it was the 18th century period drama The Favourite, which scooped the most awards. The BBC's Lizo Mazumba was there watching.
Guests of honour on the red carpet, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. And joining them at the ceremony was acting royalty. Royal-themed film The Favourite may have won the most awards, but it was the black and white Mexican movie Roma, which took home Best Director for Alfonso Cuarón and Best Film. The first time ever a Netflix production has won the night's most prestigious prize. Cuarón, born in Mexico, gave perhaps the night's most political speech.
Retreating back to a world of separation and isolation is not a solution to anything. It's simply an excuse to hide our fear within our basest instincts. Whether we like it or not, we're all connected, sharing space and time. And when we finally choose to embrace that connection, to show compassion towards one another, we all rise together.
Get back to your rooms. British star Rachel Weisz won Best Supporting Actress for The Favourite, which took home 7 awards in total, including Outstanding British Film, Best Costume Design and Best Actress for Olivia Colman.
Did you? Look at me! Look at me! How dare you! Close your eyes!
And she paid tribute to her two co-stars, Rachel Weisz and Emma Stone.
Emma and Rachel must keep it together. Not just for your performances, but for what you did after the cameras stopped rolling. And we've never talked about this, and I find it very emotional, but you were the best and classiest and coolest honour guard any woman could ever have. And I love you.
The Best Actor prize went to Rami Malek for his portrayal of Freddie Mercury in the Queen biopic Bohemian Rhapsody.
Thank you so very much to Queen, to Brian May, to Roger Taylor, to the entire Queen family. Wouldn't be here without you. And to the greatest outsider of them all, thank you, Freddie Mercury, again.
Dear Dolores, D-E-A-R, this is an animal.
While Best Supporting Actor went to Mahershala Ali for the film Green Book. And the Rising Star Award for Emerging Talent, won previously by the likes of Tom Hardy and John Boyega, was won by British Black Panther star Letitia Wright.
And that was Lizo Mazumba there reporting from the BAFTAs. Let's return to Nelson now as residents start returning to Wakefield. 2 community meetings are being held tonight. The first at Appleby School has just got underway. So let's go there now to our reporter Logan Church on the live view. Hi Logan, what's happening there?
Oh, hi, Lisa. Yes, as you said, I'm at Appleby School, where about 100 residents have met to hear the latest as to where this fire is at. Now, these residents are not from Wakefield. As we've heard earlier in the program, those residents have been told they could now return home. These residents, however, are from what we call the Four Valleys, that are the valleys up the hills that are still affected by fire or the fire has passed through. And essentially, at this stage, there is no news. They're not going to be going back to their homes today. We were told by Civil Defence earlier that they are working on a program to try and get people home permanently, but that is still very much in the works. And there are lots of complicating factors for that. One, of course, being the fire itself. Second, also the fire damage. Civil Defence spoke before about how there was a whole lot of dangerous, unstable trees that the fire had gone through, and those have to be dealt with before residents can be safely let home. There's a lot of really tired faces behind me, Lisa. They've been out of their homes now for around a week. In fact, some I spoke to earlier said even finding accommodation now is getting a little bit tricky. There's a lot of people in this area are trying to find somewhere to stay. In fact, one couple I spoke to had two quite large dogs, and they're sort of playing it day by day, as there's only so many motels and accommodation providers who will cater to dogs. There's certainly a lot of really tense people behind me who are really just waiting for some good news.
So what are you mentioned finding accommodation, pets. What are some of the other big concerns that you're hearing from them? Are they getting the information that they want?
They're certainly getting information. It might not be the information that they want to hear. Livestock, of course, remains a key concern for many. Many of the people behind me are lifestyle farmers. They have cows and sheep, and they have to get up there and feed them and water them. Now, Civil Defence just spoke before about how the program of allowing brief visits home to attend to those sorts of things, that's likely to continue tomorrow if nothing too huge happens overnight. But there's not much word as to when these people behind me can return home.
So very uncertain times for them still. Logan Church there joining us on the live view. He's at Appleby School, which is the first of two community meetings that are being held this evening. Global scams and drug trafficking on what's been described as an industrial scale have been found to be operating out of Sydney's Villawood Detention Centre. Phone taps obtained as part of an ABC investigation reveal how Nigerian detainees are allegedly running syndicates linked to organised crime networks which are making billions of dollars a year from online fraud, drug smuggling and money laundering. The ABC's Sean Rubenstein Dunlop has the story.
In 2013, the New South Wales Crime Commission stumbled on a mind-boggling drug trafficking plot run from inside Sydney's Villawood Immigration Detention Centre. Nigerian detainee and convicted drug importer Patrick Nweki was using smuggled phones to bring an unlikely drug mule into Australia. American disability pensioner and repeat scam victim Peter Strand.
I was hoodwinked, I was coerced, convinced, or otherwise led to believe something was going to happen that never happened.
Four Corners has obtained phone taps in which the Villawood detainee Patrick Nweki calls contacts around the world to arrange for Peter Strand to be scammed again into smuggling cocaine. Peter Strand's barrister is David Barrow.
He was identified as the type of gullible person who was vulnerable to this type of manipulation.
Peter Strand was one of 44 drug mules arrested at Australian airports after being drawn in by online scam syndicates. He was jailed here for 18 months before being found not guilty of drug importation. Nweki will be sentenced next month for directing and financing the operation. David Barrow again.
They seem to be like a vertically integrated company. It was an organisation that sourced the drugs, found the couriers, facilitated their transport, collected the drugs at the end, It was a well-tried, well-practiced approach.
5 months ago, in a separate case at Villawood, another Nigerian detainee was charged with running a $3 million cyber scam syndicate. Once again, contraband phones were used to target victims. Adam Myers from American cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike.
People always joke about getting an email from a prince or some other high-ranking official in West Africa, Nigeria, whatever it might be. And what that's kind of really grown into is a much more advanced scheme.
Adam Myers says online scams are funding global crime organisations, which started in Nigeria and have spread across the world.
West African cybercrime is the biggest threat that we see on the internet today. We're looking at over $12 billion in 5 years.
Former US Federal Trade Commission Director Steve Baker says Australia has underestimated the cyber syndicates for too long.
This is in our neighbourhoods. This is our friends. These are people we know. Coming to terms with the fact that these really are huge, organised, worldwide enterprises is something that I think the police around the world are still learning about, and we've got a long way to go if we're ever going to do something effective.
And that was the former director of the US Federal Trade Commission, Steve Baker, ending that report from Sean Rubenstein Dunlop. And now from the strange but true file, an area in Russia's far north has been declared a state of emergency after what's been called an invasion of dozens of polar bears. Authorities in Novye Zemlye Islands, which are home to a few thousand people, say there have been cases of bears attacking people and entering residential and public buildings. The BBC's Caroline Rigby has more.
Polar bears aren't uncommon in these parts, but the frequency and sheer number of these visitors is unprecedented. Entering homes and offices, the animals are also reported to have attacked people. Local officials have described the situation as a massive invasion, and as the world's largest land predators, that's led them to declare a state of emergency. The remote Novye Zemlya archipelago in the Russian Arctic is home to around 3,000 people, and since December, more than 50 bears have been reported in the region's main settlement. Officials say around 6 to 10 can regularly be seen in and around a local military garrison. Climate change has caused Arctic sea ice to melt, and that's driven polar bears to spend more time on land in an effort to find food. But this change in behaviour, from hunters to scavengers, has seen them increasingly come into contact and conflict with humans. And with the bears ever more present, some residents are now scared to walk down the street or even leave their homes. Polar bears are recognised as an endangered species in Russia, so hunting them is banned. Police have tried to scare them off with signals and patrols. Even local dogs have had a go. But so far, these efforts have proved largely ineffective. Now, the federal authorities have promised to send a commission to investigate, and a cull to control these beautiful but unwelcome visitors hasn't been ruled out.
Caroline Rigby with that report. As some Nelson, Tasman residents return home this evening, some are doing so without their beloved pets. 1-year-old Derek from Pigeon Valley hasn't been seen since the early hours of Sunday morning. 6-year-old Stan of Wakefield has been missing for days. Sylvia and Chris Dallin haven't seen their cat since Saturday and are appealing for your help to coax him home. Our producer Bridget Berg spoke to Sylvia a short time ago about her cat, Mango.
He's 13 years of age and he's got a light covering, so he's really very light ginger. He's got a few patterns on him. He's very slinky, he's quite thin, but due to his age, but he eats and eats and eats. And so it's called Mango due to his colouring. And we're just really, very shy as well. He likes just roaming in the bushes as well. So that's a good thing. He could be in someone's garden, and
Where did he go missing from?
He was missing from Caroline Place, which is off Kingsford Drive in Stoke, and we've been staying here for the past 3 days, obviously due to the evacuation.
And you're evacuated from Wakefield, are you?
Yes, actually, 88 Valley Road.
Right,
beyond,
well, he's a valley cat, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
May well be trying to go home, do you think?
I would say so, but who knows? You know, I hear all these miracle cats in the past that I've heard over the years that a month later they're at the doorstep. So.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, never give up hope. So
Never give up hope.
Mango's
That's true.
actually a strawberry blonde, I think.
Yes, I reckon so as well. Yeah, definitely.
Long hair. And,
yes, very long hair. Slinky.
Quite a long body too from the photo I'm looking at. I mean,
Yes.
he's a decent-sized cat.
Yes, he is.
When was the last time you saw Mango?
Probably coming up a day and a half now. So, yeah, this would have been the second night that we've missed him. Yeah.
Oh, you will be missing him now. If people think they see Mango, what should they do, please?
Come up to him slowly. Just call his name. He likes little treats like bickies and stuff. So just coach him. As you know, like I said, he likes bushes and just see what he does. So he's going to get hungry. He'll be hungry. So yeah, he will come up. But yeah, he's quite shy. So I think yeah, he will approach someone if he's hungry. So
now, people, you want them to call you, do you, Sylvia?
Yes, please. Yeah.
What number should they call?
The number is, well, hopefully we'll be home. I do the home number first. It's 03 541 8888.
So that is the shout out for Mango, and go online, check him out so that you can see what he looks like. It's pretty hard for people being out of their homes and also for those people who cannot find their pets. Quick bit of feedback on the interview with Arthur Taylor. This person says, this man has caused so much pain and suffering and you're doing a fluffy human interest story. Shame on you, RNZ.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. Residents from the fire-threatened town of Wakefield are returning to their homes as fast as they can, but with a warning they need to be ready to be evacuated again at short notice. The town was emptied of its 2,500 residents last week because of the volatile Tasman bushfire. Civil Defence announced 2 hours ago they could go home. A Wakefield resident on her way back home says it's unlikely her flock of sheep will survive after being left since last week. Anne Mokhtar left 70 sheep and 11 cows when she evacuated from her property. She told Checkpoint she's unsure if all the stock will have survived the stress of the last few days.
They're hungry and our sheep will have to be transported out because they desperately need some more. But the cattle seem to be okay. We seem to be, if we keep feeding them, they'll maintain. Yeah, just there's water for them.
Wakefield resident Anne Mokhtar. Fire and Emergency says the Tasman fire is still not contained. The incident controller, Trevor Mitchell, says Wakefield residents still need to be on their guard.
We haven't got a containment of the fire rule at the moment. Our guys have done some great work in reinforcing the lines around the fire, and we are comfortable at the moment that it's safe for the community to go back, but we can't preempt the weather and the changing conditions, so we say be prepared to evacuate still.
The fire incident controller, Trevor Mitchell. The Nelson Tasman Civil Defence Group Controller, Roger Ball, says he's still planning for residents of the 4 rural valleys forced out by the fire to be able to return home. 2 community meetings are being held tonight. The first at Appleby School has just got underway. The Tasman Mayor has reiterated the ban on using farming and other outside equipment in the area because of the fire risk. Fire and Emergency has said the most likely cause of the fire, which started last Tuesday, was a spark from machinery in Pigeon Valley. Richard Kempthorne says reports have been coming through that people have been using equipment despite it being banned yesterday.
Forestry harvesting operations have ceased, and the requirement to cease in certain areas from Mount Arthur to the Richmond Range, across to the north of Nelson and further down south. So quite a big area, and that includes farm machinery as well. Interestingly, in one of those areas the cultivation was occurring next to the paddock where the helicopters are taking off from.
Richard Kempthorne says if people see outside machinery being used, they need to report it to the Tasman District Council's compliance team. An Auckland jury has been told Malcolm Rewa murdered Susan Burdett with a baseball bat she kept for her own protection. Rewa, a serial rapist, is on trial in the High Court at Auckland, the 3rd time he's been tried for the killing. Ms Burdett was bludgeoned to death in her Papatoetoe home nearly 27 years ago. In his opening address, Crown Prosecutor Gareth Kay said Rewa was responsible for a series of sexual attacks on other women between 1987 and 1996. He said the features of Ms Burdett's case were hallmarks of Rewa's past sexual and violent offending. Rewa's lawyer, Paul Chambers, said his client was innocent after his first 2 trials and is before the court again as an innocent man. A jury has heard how a Northland police officer sexually assaulted 2 women while investigating crimes they had reported. Detective Inspector Kevin Burke, who was mostly based in Orewa, has appeared before a jury, and Justice Sarah Cates in the High Court in Auckland today. He's pleaded not guilty to 2 charges of indecently assaulting a woman and 2 of unlawful sexual connection. The names of the 2 complainants are suppressed. On behalf of the Crown, Joe Murdoch described how Mr Burke assaulted the 2 women who are unknown to one another.
The Crown says that they have one thing in common, that Kevin Burke sexually assaulted them after they had put their trust and confidence in him as a police officer.
Joe Murdoch, the defence says Mr Burke had consensual sexual relations with the first complainant and only professional relations with the second. The police say a 5-month-old baby was found dead at the scene of a suspected homicide in Motueka last night. A 41-year-old woman was also seriously injured at the Memorial Drive address. Emergency services were alerted shortly after 8:30 last night. The police have been examining the scene today. They say they're speaking with someone in relation to the death, but so far no charges have been laid. The toilet paper manufacturer Cotton Soft has been fined $315,000 after a worker's arms were caught in rollers. The worker suffered crush injuries, degloving and lacerations on his arms, as well as rib fractures in January 2017. The company was sentenced in the Manukau District Court today. WorkSafe's investigation found the guarding on the machinery departed significantly from current industry standards, and while risks had been identified, nothing was done to fix them. The head of Specialist Interventions, Simon Humphreys, says there is no excuse for the terrible record around machinery guarding. He says the worker was needlessly injured by a risk that was identified. Cotton Soft was also ordered to pay $45,000 in reparations. It's just after 6:05. On to sport now. Rugby World Cup winning hero Stephen Donald is to play for the Chiefs again. The 35-year-old Donald kicked the winning goal at the 2011 Rugby World Cup final and has been drafted into the Chiefs squad as an injury replacement for first 5 Tian Falcon, who'll miss the season with a ruptured Achilles tendon. Donald, who played in Japan last year, joined the Chiefs at training today. He made his Super Rugby debut for the franchise in 2005 and has played 104 games for them in 3 stints, his last being in 2017. Meanwhile, All Blacks loose forward Liam Squire has reportedly signed to play with Japan post the World Cup. The UFC president, Dana White, says the New Zealand mixed martial arts fighter Israel Adesanya has got what it takes to be the world champion. Adesanya beat Brazilian legend Anderson Silva in a middleweight bout at UFC 234 in Melbourne yesterday. The 29-year-old Nigerian-born New Zealander now appears to be the #1 contender to take on Australian UFC middleweight champion Robert Whittaker, whose bout last night was called off because of injury. White says Adesanya has all the qualities of a great fighter.
The kid's got it. I mean, he's got that... not only is he talented in the octagon, he's talented outside of it too. His interviews are exciting. He's an interesting guy. He's fun to watch. And I think he's got a really bright future here.
Israel Adesanya is now undefeated in 16 professional bouts. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the choreographer Rena Che on her latest work setting dance moves to K-pop. Dana Johansson surveys another weekend of sport, and we have a window on the world of Brexit from the point of view of Adrian Goldberg, who is thinking of ditching his UK passport for one from his father's homeland of Germany. That way he can stay in the EU even after Britain leaves. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
We're funded through New Zealand On Air, of course, and here's the short forecast now from Met Service through to midnight tomorrow, Tuesday. Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel, fine but brief showers possible around midday tomorrow. Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine apart from isolated showers in the afternoon and evenings. Waitomo through to Manawatu, that includes Taumarunui and Taihape, fine today. Cloudy periods tomorrow, isolated showers until evening. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Waited Upper, Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine but brief light showers possible in the morning tomorrow. Bulla and Northern Westland, rain developing this evening, easing to fine spells, isolated showers tomorrow. Southern Westland and Fiordland, rain with brief heavy falls, easing to showers in the morning. Fine spells increasing. Canterbury, mainly fine for the rest of today. Brief light rain possible overnight, then cloudy periods tomorrow. Otago and Southland, cloud increases with a few spots of rain from this evening. Fine spells tomorrow with isolated showers. Low cloud is possible about the coast and low cloud and drizzle for the Chatham Islands. It's just after 8 minutes past 6.
And you're with Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen and this is RNZ National. Let's return now to Nelson, where on day 7 of the fires there was some good news for the residents of Wakefield. Just after 4 o'clock this afternoon they were given the green light to return to their homes. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Dan Cook are at what was the cordon on State Highway 6 and join us now live. Nita, there must be some real relief tonight for Wakefield residents.
Absolutely relief, Lisa. There's a lot more hustle and bustle slowly coming back to the town. It doesn't seem people have been rushing in all in one go, but certainly people are moving through, sitting back in their shops, having dinner at home for the first time in a few days and absolutely to be relieved back in their homes. One of those people who's just arrived back home tonight is Heather Lyons. I'm joined by her. She's a long-time Wakefield resident and she's very graciously joined me despite just walking in the door when I found her. Heather, how has the last few days been for you?
Been so traumatic really, but it's one of those things. It's the same for everybody, isn't it?
What have you found to be most stressful?
Leaving the family home, of course, because it was built by my husband.
And you weren't sure when you'd be back or what might happen?
No, just unsure.
So when you left, what were the most important things that you needed to take?
My birds, my photographs, my papers, my laptop, and my father's bag of treasures.
And you bundled all of that into the car. How did the birds work?
Oh, they were a bit traumatic too. I had to get one of them out of the big cage and he didn't like that.
So where did you all go? How have the past few days been?
We went up to Fox Hill to my granddaughter's and she's a lovely girl. She'd take anybody in and it's been wonderful because I've had time with the great-granddaughter too. And yep, they've all been so good to me.
But at the same time, weighing on your mind was what's going to happen here?
Yeah, you can't see it from up there. You can't see what's going on. You have to depend on the cell phone and civil defence messages.
So when you got the news today that you could go back, what was that like?
Oh, that was a great relief, yeah. I almost cried. Couldn't get out of there quick enough.
And so now that you're back, are you completely at ease or are you still wary?
I'm still aware that there is a fire out there and that we could be sent out again, so I'm leaving the cars half packed.
And what do you think in terms of the response? There's still helicopters buzzing not far from us, a lot of army and civil defence on the ground. Is it alarming?
No, it's amazing. We're so thankful for them because everyone's doing the best they can. Yeah.
Have you had any interactions with them? The police, anyone during the convoys?
Yeah, we had a policeman come down in the car with us yesterday to help me get some more things from the house. He was wonderful.
So those convoys were just supposed to go straight through?
But he came with us and we went back and dropped him off and we went back into town and did some shopping and we dropped a bag of nibbles and goodies off to them when we came back through.
And that the emergency services have been really gracious as well. They're obviously happy to be helping.
Yeah, they are. They're wonderful, really. Yeah, we're so lucky here.
So what are you most looking forward to about being back home tonight?
Sleeping in my own bed. Getting a good night's sleep, although I had a nice bed up there.
Do you know anyone else who's affected by those 4 valleys? The fires up those ways?
My son and his wife had animals up Pigeon Valley, and I know Michael Kempthorne had his apple orchard up there, his father's. I used to go to work there and pick apples. I just felt for them as well.
Thoughts are still with them, I guess, as they're not allowed back in yet.
No, that's right. I think we're very lucky to be able to get back.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Heather. I'll let you get back to your own bed and to your own dinner at your place tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely talking to you.
And Lisa, that was Heather Lyons, long-time Wakefield resident. She's lived in her place for more than 50 years and was absolutely relieved to get back there with news that Wakefield's all open but still on standby should that fire flare up and everyone may need to evacuate once more.
Thank you, Nita, and thanks to Heather. As you say, just barely got through the front door and Nita Blake Person was on the doorstep, so really appreciate Heather's time this evening. Meanwhile, our reporter Katie Scotcher is now in Wakefield. In the past hour, she returned home with residents Julie Gurman and Ian Sutton. Katie, what was that like?
Well, yeah, we got back to Julie and Ian's property in Wakefield about an hour ago, like you said. The first thing they did, obviously, when they arrived home was to check for any damage inside and outside the property, and thankfully there wasn't any. There were a few burnt pine needles around the place and a little coating of ash on some solar panels that they have outside. And then we got to the important stuff. We went inside and fed their tropical fish, which they've been really, really worried about over the past couple of days. The fish were absolutely fine, a little bit hungry, but yeah, all good there. And then sat down at their dining room table, made a cup of tea, and they just spoke about this immense stress that they've been under for the past 4 days and how pleased and relieved they are to be home finally. They told me that they haven't slept very well over the past few nights, so they're really looking forward to sleeping in their own bed and using their own shower.
So tell me, I mean, they're being told that it's probably potentially not over yet. They need to be on alert to kind of pack up and go again. What's that uncertainty like for them?
Well, they've been spending the last few nights at the A&P showgrounds out in Richmond. They have a little camper van and a nice little setup with their dogs and their cat that they've kind of taken out there. And they've basically just packed all of that up. It's sitting in their driveway ready to go if they have to leave again, and they've told me that if they get the message that they have to go, they won't hesitate. They'll just hop in the van with their 3 dogs and cat and head back to the A&P showgrounds out in Richmond.
And so Wakefield generally, I know only some people have been allowed back in. Police are telling other people if they don't have a real reason to be there, they shouldn't be there. Does it feel back to normal?
I mean, it's quite quiet at the moment. I mean, I'm just parked down a little residential street at the moment, and there are a few cars driving past. It's nothing, nothing major. But Ian said as we were driving back into the town that the traffic was like gridlock traffic, which it certainly wasn't. There were about 5 cars on the road. But he said for a place like Wakefield, where you're driving at 30 kilometres per hour, the roads were very, very busy.
Clearly hasn't lost his sense of humour in all of this. That is Katie Scotcher joining us there from Wakefield. She has been back in with returning residents who are again relieved to be in their own homes tonight, even though they're on alert. They might have to go again depending on what happens with the fire. So just to recap, 190 firefighters have continued to battle the fire today. It's now burning across 2,300 hectares inside a 25-kilometre perimeter. But while the situation remains volatile, it appears the hard work of many firefighters is beginning to pay off as the situation improves. Crews and helicopters are still busy watching for any flare-ups. Our reporter Andrew McRae ventured up into the hills this afternoon to talk to the firefighters.
I'm high on a hill in the northeastern sector of the fire zone in the Moteri North Forest, and there are a number of firefighters here, fire crews mainly from Christchurch here, and they're busy dampening down hotspots, looking for flare-ups. They have an excavator working as well, clearing away a lot of the undergrowth and a lot of the flash, and they have a hose, and they're busy digging, looking for those hotspots and putting them out, just so if the wind does pick up, it doesn't flare up again. It's really hard, hot and dirty work, and these guys are on the job about 12 hours a day, and they do stop for a couple of breaks, but most of the time they're busy down the hills, up the valleys, working really, really hard. Tim Heaton works for the High Country Fire Team based in Christchurch.
We've had a few flare-ups, but making sure that it doesn't jump any lines. This area is like an old skid site, so it's all buried roots and slash and things. So like you've got to basically get to the fire, which is just once the breeze comes up and the sun heats up during the day, they'll just pop out and then jump up into the trees. So basically, you just got to be vigilant and be methodical and try and get everything out, and otherwise it'll just start all over again.
Ewan Peters from the Bottle Lake Rural Firefighting Team. He says the main issue they're facing is the wind direction constantly changing.
It's pretty unpredictable up here on these ridgelines, so the hot spots just keep popping up, so it's constantly moving.
Greg Barrett's been a firefighter for 3 years. He says while it's hard work, their training kicks in quickly.
Trained to be taking care of each other, and that's one of the big things is, we always look out after ourselves but also look after each other around us, and that's a key thing, and keeping hydration, keeping food. So we take regular breaks, which is really important because you can lose a huge amount of fluid through sweat, and that's, you're working hard.
In this part of the fire zone, the firefighters are working meticulously and methodically, finding the hot spots, stopping them from flaring up and making sure they're completely out. Justin Gilmore.
You will dig it out, and then you'll thoroughly water it through and just keep digging until you get down. You'll notice that you'll go through a layer of slash or peat or whatever's in the ground, and then you'll come to the clay, and then once you're down to the clay, you're almost pretty much right.
Pines Beach rural firefighter Richard Griffith says after days of firefighting, it can be hard to switch off.
The hardest part's sometimes sleeping at night after a big day. I think you just get your old mind's going fairly hard, and
after that hard day, which is definitely hard work, 12-hour day possibly, you must be knackered by the end of it.
Yeah, some days are worse than others. Earlier on, when you're more on the go, flat out, yes, you definitely know that you've had a hard day. There's other days when you're doing more of a mop-up or just cruising along monitoring the situations. They can be a little bit easier, but it's still pretty draining work.
The firefighters don't see themselves as heroes. Rather, they say it's about helping out and trying to make a difference. The people of Nelson, Tasman may see it differently. In Nelson for Checkpoint, call Andrew McRae-Tene.
A political poll has shown National drop below Labour for the first time in its history. The News Hub Reid Research poll just released has National dropping 3.6 points to 41.6. That's the party's worst result in over a decade. The Labour Party is up 4.9 points to 47.5%. The best result it's ever achieved in this particular poll. Political commentator Professor Claire Robinson has been looking at the poll and joins me now. Bad news for National and Simon Bridges, would you say, Claire?
Well, I think it's bad news for Simon Bridges because he hasn't shown a great improvement in his leadership standing. It's not that bad for National. It is fantastic for Labour. I mean, they've gone up over 20 points in the last just over a year, and that's a huge bump.
This latest bump, could it be rogue in the numbers?
No. This is like, people call this the honeymoon period, and that's slightly facetious, but new governments tend to have the benefit of the doubt. People like their new leaders, people like the new policies. Even though I think Labour will be breathing a sigh of relief because it could have gone the other way. The Kiwi Build fiasco could have brought it down, but this poll shows that voters are still prepared to give Labour the benefit of the doubt. I think they've taken a lot of votes off New Zealand First. That is not necessarily realistic of what we might see in an election, but it is a very good result for Labour at this point in the electoral cycle.
So if we can go back to National for a minute. So they were, last Reid Research poll, 45.1 points down to 41.6. What do you think that means for Simon Bridges? Could this be the beginning of the end of his leadership?
Well, yes, it could be. When you look at when Labour rolled its leaders, they were in the low 30s and in the 20s in terms of David Shearer, Phil Goff and David Cunliffe and Andrew Little. So, for National it isn't quite so bad, but the data is the stats are going down. They're not going in the right direction for National. Judith Collins, who has scored higher than Simon Bridges in the preferred leadership, she's got 6.2 to Simon Bridges' 5, has had the benefit over the last couple of weeks of being able to totally attack Labour on Kiwi Build. So she's been more high profile over the last month. And so that's what we're seeing now. Does that make her a better leader long term? The jury's out on that one. But I think that the thing for National is that they've been attacking, which is their job in opposition, but they haven't yet shown voters what a new National government will be under Simon Bridges. And so that's their job over the next year, to really come up with something new that is not the old National Party.
So could that attack strategy be backfiring? Because obviously they have highlighted tax. They are raising the issue of uncertainty around tax. Immigration, obviously the Carol Schrubeck, and you mentioned Kiwi Build and the lack of numbers there from the government in terms of houses built. Could this negative campaigning and attack campaign be backfiring on them?
Well, that's what they have to do. That's what opposition parties have to do. But at the same time, they've got to present themselves as an alternative government, and that's the missing part of the equation. They haven't yet done that. Now, they haven't got much time to do that. I would say they've only got 6 months to really show what a new National-led government would be like. I suspect they're not ready to do that yet, and that's going to be Simon Bridges' weakness. If he can't come up with a very new national government, he's for the history books.
Before we go, Claire, the minor parties, kind of interesting. With these numbers, it could be just Labour and Greens together to form a government. But I see the Greens, they're on just 5.1% according to that poll. That's kind of perilously close to the threshold of oblivion, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, but not as bad as New Zealand First on 2.9. So I think the Greens will be really happy with that, because actually under this Labour-led coalition government, they haven't had many opportunities to shine. So the fact that they're still sitting on 5.1 shows that their core voter base, the ones that are truly loyal to the Greens, are sticking with them, which is absolutely what they need. The Greens will still have to be showing over the next year and a half what they have to bring to the table that is different from Labour. New Zealand First often falls down to this point anyway. This is kind of like the dip in the electoral cycle, and the big challenge will be for them, what do they prove that's different for them, especially if Winston Peters goes. Now, who knows whether that happens or not. But I don't think that they'll be too worried about 2.9, but they need to go up from here.
Thanks, Claire. It's good to talk to you. Professor Claire Robinson there giving us some insight into this News Hub Reid research poll that has National dropping 3.6 points to 41.6 in that poll. A jury has heard accusations that a Northland police officer sexually assaulted 2 women while investigating crimes they'd reported. The trial of Detective Inspector Kevin Burke, who was mostly based in Orewa, has begun in the High Court in Auckland. Eva Corlett was there.
Kevin Burke stood straight and looked ahead as the Crown set out the facts of the case. He has pleaded not guilty to 2 charges of indecently assaulting a woman over 16 and 2 of unlawful sexual connection. The names of the 2 complainants are suppressed. On behalf of the Crown, Joe Murdoch described how Mr Burke assaulted the 2 women, who are unknown to one another.
The 2 complainants come from very different worlds and led very different lives. Yet the Crown says that they have one thing in common, that Kevin Burke sexually assaulted them after they had put their trust and confidence in him as a police officer.
The first complainant, who was 46, met Mr Burke in 2002 after she reported a man's fraudulent behaviour. Mr Burke, who was 44 years old at the time, began investigating. Ms Murdoch says 2 weeks later he turned up to the complainant's house unannounced with beer and wine in his hand.
She did not expect Kevin Burke, a police officer that she'd met once, turn up at her home. There was no arrangement for him to do so.
Mr Burke proceeded to get drunk on her deck. She gave him some pasta and made up a bed for him in the spare room to stop him from driving. Ms Murdoch says it was when the complainant was pointing out the room to Mr Burke, he grabbed her and pulled her on top of him.
She alleges that Kevin Burke started to kiss her all over her face and neck, and he then ended up on top of her, physically overpowering her and bringing her to the floor.
It was then, she says, he sexually assaulted her. Ms Murdoch says up until that point, the complainant had trusted Mr Burke and his professionalism. In July 2002, Mr Burke met the second complainant, who was 26 and a victim of a violent attack at the hands of her then partner. Mr Burke was the officer in charge of investigating the case. Over the next few months, he turned up to her house unannounced. The first time, dressed in his work clothes, he brought paperwork, pizza and wine. After drinking the wine, the second complainant felt affected by the alcohol and put herself to bed, while Mr Burke kept drinking with her older housemate. Ms Murdoch says the woman thought she heard the lights being switched off and Mr Burke leaving through the ranch slider.
Instead, he came into her bedroom, he got undressed, came into her bed, pushed her shoulder down when she turned around to look at him so that she was lying flat on her stomach. He didn't say anything to her. He then, it is alleged, proceeded to rub himself up and down on her back with his genitals, stomach, chest, which after a short period of time resulted in him shaking and shivering.
Ms Murdoch says on other occasions he pinned her to the wall in the hallway and rubbed his body up against hers and forcibly performed oral sex on her. Acting for the defendant, Arthur Fairley, highlighted to the jury that there are two competing narratives. In the first case, he says there was ongoing contact.
Phone contact, coffee somewhere, perhaps a dinner. We'll wait and see about that. Then what happened is he stays the night and there is consensual sexual activity. Next point, they continue to have contact. They have dinner after that, in fact.
Mr Fairley says in the second case, Mr Burke had contact with the complainant, but it was only ever in the context of his police work. The trial is set down for 2 weeks. I tāma ki makauro mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Eva Colette, tēnei.
And just enough time for a little bit of your feedback before we go. Some of you telling us off for giving Arthur Taylor the time of day. He's just been released from jail this morning. But Susan says, let's hope Aotearoa gives Arthur a chance. Maybe he just wants to be who he is and his sister and family love him. The Bible says, don't judge and be a bigot. Blessings to Arthur and his caring family, says Suzanne. And just a quick update on Wakefield and the fires. Some Wakefield residents are returning home tonight, but just a reminder, they've been told to leave, be ready to leave immediately. If they do have to go, they will get an alert via text, and the Wakefield fire siren will sound continuously. That is if conditions change and they do need to leave again. No rain forecast for the next 14 days, so it's not over just yet. Thank you so much for joining us this evening on Checkpoint. That's us for tonight. Catch you tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines now at 6:30. The National Party is polling below Labour for the first time in 12 years in the latest News Hub Reid Research poll. Residents from the town of Wakefield, threatened by a huge bushfire over the past week, have now been allowed home, but Fire and Emergency say the bushfire is still not contained. A jury has heard evidence that a Northland police officer charged with sexually assaulting 2 women abused the women's trust while investigating crimes they had reported. The police say a 5-month-old baby was found dead and a woman injured at the scene of a suspected homicide in Motueka last night. And the Prime Minister says under no circumstances is it acceptable for government departments to include questions about New Zealanders' political persuasions in surveys. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather will be at 7 o'clock.
RNZ National, with a fresh take on the day's news at 10 every weeknight with Karen Hay.